hope you guys are getting this connection. Please send me a note and to let me know that you're getting this feed. Apparently the network here is is horrible and sketchy. I have a lot of problems, technical issues. Bear with me, folks. I'm still working on this. So I'm gonna, I guess, take it from where I left off. We'll call this part 2 of the Being Present and Connected. I believe I was talking about the reality TV piece before we got cut off. And as I was saying, you know, when I was married, I often was asked to sit down and watch reality TV, which I am not a fan of. But everything we do is not always about us. Sometimes we've got to make some concessions because the people that we have in our life want to do it. You know, what's funny about saying that is, when we talk about making concessions as it pertains to our children, we don't blink. I mean, we do things all the time for our kids that we really don't care to do. I mean, who wants to stand out in the sun for hours and hours while our kids play football or run track and things of that nature? But we do it. We give up our personal time and we send out there, and we do it because it makes them happy. But for some reason, that's not always the case when we're married or when we have relationships. And there's obviously something wrong with that, and I think that is the arrogance in all of us that says, why should I do this for this person? Well, certainly if you're married, you should do it because you took a vow to do it, and then secondly, this person is the person you're supposed to be with till death do you part. So I mean, again, if I had to do it all over again, how I went about doing certain things would be very different. And I would challenge you to think about those things right now. I guarantee you're going through fights, and a lot of it has to do with ego and things of that nature. Just don't let yourself go there. I think another thing is making sure that as a couple, the other person feels that they're a priority over everything else. If you find yourself in a situation where you're doing things and your husband and your wife or your boyfriend, your girlfriend just always seems to be second rate or third rate at best, there's a problem with that. I think anytime we're in a relationship of any sort, people need to feel that if it had to come to it, you'd drop what you're doing for them. Again, if you're a good parent, you'll do that for your children. And I think sometimes we underestimate the power of that inside of relationships, where people don't feel that they're a priority. And you remember earlier when I was talking about deposits and withdrawals, that is a withdrawal that will hurt your relationship going forward, because usually when people start that way, they don't stop. It just continues and it just piles on until we start to treat each other with a lack of respect and a lack of being a priority, because now it becomes, you did it to me, I'm going to do it to you. And that becomes a very dangerous thing to do. You know, being present and connected in relations is actually, I think, good for your soul. I think we all feel better when we are made available to people who we care about. You know, it makes us feel good to be needed or to feel needed by people. And when you're doing a good job at that, you do feel that way because the person does need you. All of a sudden, they need to hear your advice. They need to hear what you think about things. They need to hear your words of encouragement. And over time, although you're making them feel good, you're making yourself feel good too, because it's good for your soul to be that way, and it leads to a more positive relationship. A lot of positive effects that come from that. In part because, you know, it's good to not be selfish. And I think, especially in today's world, most relationships, we exhibit more selfishness than anything else. It's always about, what are you doing for me, and not what I can do for you. It's always about, well, you don't do it for me, so why should I do it for you? Which, in my opinion, goes against everything about being in a relationship. Again, it's about vulnerability. You do have to make yourself vulnerable, because there is a hope that if you're putting it out, it's going to come back. And I think if you stay the course long enough, eventually it will. And if it does not, then I guess you'll have to make some decisions as to whether or not you're in the right relationship with somebody if you're constantly putting out and they aren't. Now, having said that, I'm not saying that you foolishly give somebody 100% when they're giving you 10%. It's not what I'm saying. I think you do have to kind of be able to balance that a little bit and make sure that somebody is putting into you as you're putting into them. Does not mean that it has to be 50-50, and I think that's where people get themselves in trouble. But you need to see some work. You need to see that they are actively working towards putting into you as you're putting into them. So, in short, I think it just brings purpose to our lives. It brings meaning to our life, because we're doing for someone, and we're doing it without being selfish, selflessly, I should say. Because most times than not, people put things out with the expectation of getting something back, and that's where you get yourself in trouble. If you're not going to do it because your heart leads you to do it, but because you believe there's a payoff at the end of it, then it's not sincere. Make sure you get with the right people and the right kind of person who you can feel confident will give you what you're giving them. So a lot of times people get themselves in trouble because they're in relationships with people who they knew right out the gate were selfish. And now they're expecting this person to magically become this person who's all about them, but they were never that to begin with. So, make the right decision early on, and you won't have to worry about some of the problems that we're talking about. Or at least maybe hopefully that person will transform into somebody that you always saw them to be. Because you just heard me say I certainly wasn't that in my marriage, say my first marriage, my only marriage. At least not all the time. I think I was that, but I just wasn't as consistently as I should have been. So that says that people do have the ability to transform into something, but you got to make sure that the core is there to begin with. You got to make sure that their heart and soul is there to begin with. If you're marrying a jerk, or if you're marrying some blood-sucking leech, and that person has always been that way, they probably will not transform into what you hope them to be. So you just make the right decision, early going. So remember, present and connected. Present and connected with your friends and family. Making sure that you give them what they need based on their personality. Not being offended when they don't act the way you want them to act. It may not be for the reasons that you think it is. It could just be because of their ego doesn't allow them to do things, not because they don't want the help, or not because they don't want to be a certain way. Present and connected with your children. And that is something I think is the easiest one, because our children are literally a part of us. So it's easier to put that kind of work out when it comes to your kids. It is, however, not as easy to put out when we start talking about people that we have decided to enter into a relationship with, because we have beliefs of how they should be, and when they don't measure up to those things, it upsets us, and then ego comes into play, and then we react to that in typically a very negative way, in ways that don't help the relationship. Real quick before I go, I'll tell you a story. I won't mention his name, but it was incredibly impactful to me. A friend of mine who talked about, and I guess this resonated with me because this was me to a certain degree. He talked about him working at a job that he hated for so long. And it started affecting his relationship because he would come home more and more grumpy. His wife did something that I thought was very powerful, and I don't know that many would, but because she knew he was very unhappy at his job, she went to him and said, "This job is changing you. And before it does that, I would sooner sell this house. We get a smaller place, even an apartment, and you go do what you want to go do to make you happy." And that's exactly what they did. Today he's very successful. He has multiple businesses, but that would have never happened if his wife was not present and connected to him enough to know that this life that my husband is leaving is literally destroying him, and invariably destroying our relationship. And she was willing to make a sacrifice that obviously paid off. But that's what I mean when I say remaining present and connected, and seeing that, and knowing what somebody needs before it's needed. So that's all I got. I hope you got something from it. As always, I'll talk to you later. He doesn't know it yet, but the next episode will be a father-son video that talks about some of the challenges between parents and children, where he'll be talking hopefully honestly from his perspective, as I will be mine. So until next time, one love. Peace.